Hi everyone. Before we get into this audiobook, I'd really appreciate it if you could hit the subscribe button and drop a like. It helps me out a lot as well as contributes a lot to the channel. Now, let's get into the story. I hope you enjoy. Morning light, diffused by the antique lace at Nyra's window, dappled her skin as she faced her reflection. Today, she turned 18. Today, she was to bond with Theron, Alpha of the Silver Creek Pack. A nervous flutter, like a trapped bird, vibrated within her. She smoothed the cool linen of her dress, a shade of pale azure reminiscent of a summer dawn, chosen to enhance her eye color. She yearned to project an image of worthiness. A ghost of a smile played on her lips, conjuring a vivid memory. At 7, concealed behind the ancient oak that guarded the training grounds, she'd watched Theron spar with his father. Even at 17, his movements possessed a captivating blend of power and litheness. Sweat glossed his flexing muscles as he deflected a strike, jaw set with fierce resolve. She recalled clutching wildflowers, their fragile forms crushed in her small hand, her heart brimming with an innocent adoration she couldn't yet articulate. That day, she'd envisioned fighting at his side, his strength a bulwark against all threats. That night, dreams painted him crowning her with blossoms, declaring her his queen. A childish fancy, perhaps, yet one that had taken root in her heart, growing with each passing year. Nyra pushed a stray lock from her face, her mirrored gaze questioning. Was she resilient enough? Courageous enough? Deserving of him? Doubts, like insidious tendrils, threatened to strangle the budding hope within her. She suppressed them, clinging to the promise of the day. Today, she would be Theron's. Today, the longing would be hers. The enticing scents of roasting venison and wood smoke wafted from the kitchens, mingling with the sharp tang of autumn. The pack was gathering in the clearing, their voices a muted chorus of anticipation. Nyra inhaled deeply, fortifying herself. A tangible buzz of excitement permeated the air, like a gathering storm. This was it. As she descended the staircase, the murmur swelled, coalescing into discernible voices. She heard her mother's melodic tone, punctuated by her father's resonant laughter. Her younger brother, Finn, likely exaggerated his hunting skills to anyone within earshot. They were all here family, pack poised to celebrate her union with their alpha. Reaching the landing, she paused, gathering her composure. Her mother hurried forward, her face radiant with pride, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Nyra, my darling," she breathed, her voice thick with emotion. "You are breathtaking." She smoothed an invisible crease from the azure fabric, her touch a comforting reassurance. "Theron is fortunate." Nyra offered a strained smile, her throat constricted. "Thank you, Mother." Her father gave her shoulder a firm, grounding squeeze. "Don't let him cow you, girl," he advised, his eyes twinkling mischievously. "Remember, you're a Silver Creek wolf. Strong and unwavering." Finn, eager to contribute, chirped, "Yeah, Nyra. Put him in his place." Nyra chuckled, the sound hollow even to her own ears. "I'll do my best," she replied, her focus already drawn toward the clearing, toward the man she had worshipped for so long. Theron stood beneath the ancient oak, his broad form casting a long shadow. He wore simple leather and tunic, his dark hair swept back, emphasizing the chiseled planes of his face and the piercing intensity of his cerulean eyes. He exuded the aura of an alpha, powerful and in command. A tremor traced Nyra's spine as their gazes met. He offered a brief nod, his expression inscrutable. The air crackled with expectation as Nyra began her walk, the eyes of the entire pack fixed upon her. She concentrated on placing one foot ahead of the other, fighting to subdue the tremor in her hands. Wildflowers and woven garlands adorned the clearing, transforming the familiar space into a hallowed ground. The pack elders formed a circle around the oak, their faces grave, their eyes brimming with ancient knowledge. Reaching Theron's side, he turned to face her, his gaze sweeping over her with cool assessment. She held her breath, seeking a flicker of warmth, a hint of fondness, anything to loosen the knot of anxiety in her stomach. But his expression remained devoid of emotion, his eyes cold and distant. "Nyra," he declared, his voice resonating across the clearing. "We gather to witness the bonding of two wolves, to bind our bloodlines and fortify our pack." He paused, his gaze encompassing the assembled wolves. "However," he continued, his tone hardening, "I have reached a decision." The air stilled, the murmuring ceased, a collective gasp rippling through the crowd. Nyra's heart plunged, a glacial dread washing over her. Somehow, she knew what was coming. Theron turned back to her, his eyes locking with hers, and in that instant, she glimpsed not the strength and authority she had always admired, but a flicker of something else, something unreadable. Fear? Regret? Or simply disappointment? "Nyra," he stated, his voice flat, "I reject you as my mate." The words hung suspended, heavy and suffocating, each syllable a hammer blow to her heart. The world listed, colors bleeding, sounds dissolving into a dull roar. She swayed, her legs threatening to give way. A wave of murmurs erupted from the pack, a cacophony of shock and disbelief. Her mother cried out. Her father surged forward, his face a mask of fury. But Nyra registered none of it. She was encased in a bubble of silence, her mind reeling, her heart shattering into fragments. Theron's pronouncement echoed in her ears, a cruel and relentless mantra. "I reject Uwai, reject Uwai, reject you." He stepped back, severing the invisible tie that had connected them for so long, leaving her exposed and vulnerable at the center of the clearing. "I cannot bond with weakness," he continued, his voice slicing through the stunned silence. "Our pack needs fortitude, resilience, a bloodline that can weather coming storms. You lack these qualities, Nyra. You are unworthy." His words were a searing brand, indelibly marking her soul, forever altering her destiny. In that moment, Nyra's world collapsed, her cherished dreams and nurtured hopes reduced to ashes. The girl who had imagined herself Theron's mate, ruling at his side, evaporated, replaced by an empty shell of anguish and disbelief. The clearing blurred, the faces of her pack indistinct. She sensed their pity, their confusion, their judgment. But above all, she felt the crushing weight of Theron's rejection. Turning her back on the Alpha, Nyra moved through the crowd, finding solace only in the forest, the one place she could escape. She couldn't bear to face her family, friends, or anyone from Silver Creek while Theron's cruel judgment still rang in her heart. Legs driving, she bolted into the trees. Theron's words pressed down like lead, each breath a heartbreak, each step a disbelief. Sobbing, she wept her shattered dreams for all to hear. She wasn't strong. She wasn't worthy. She was useless. He had made sure of that. Shattered bonds. The air vibrated with barely suppressed energy as Nyra knelt before Theron. Her heart, a nervous hummingbird moments ago, now hammered a hopeful tattoo against her ribs. The ancient stones encircling them pulsed with the collective breath of the pack, each wolf a silent sentinel to the ritual binding their alpha to his chosen. Sunlight filtered through the canopy of venerable oaks, splashed the glade in mosaics of luminance. Theron's hand, etched with the map of hard work, extended toward hers. His touch, a jolt of pure electricity, banished the lingering shadows of uncertainty. This was it, the culmination of a lifelong dream, woven from girlish yearnings and unwavering fidelity, stood within reach. The usual steel in Theron's gaze softened as he met her eyes. A fleeting tenderness sparked within their depths, enough to steal her breath and tint the world with the vibrant hues of possibility. He began the old chant, his voice a resonant force. Words, legacies carried down through generations of Silver Creek alphas, resonated, weaving a tangible connection. Nyra responded, her voice a tremulous echo, yet laced with unfeigned devotion. As their voices intertwined, raw power charged the circle, a visible aurora arcing between them. Nyra felt a tug, a subtle draw towards Theron's very core. It was an alluring promise of mutual strength and steadfast dedication. Then the current shifted. The soft light in Theron's eyes froze into an arctic chill. The gentle pull turned into a brutal wrench, severing the nascent connection. His hand, once promising comfort, now clamped down, bruising her digits. The incantation fractured, the ancient words catching like gravel in his throat. The shimmering energy sputtered and died, leaving a vacuum that seemed to drain the color from the world. Confusion warred with burgeoning horror as Nyra looked up at him. The brief tenderness had vanished, replaced by an icy void. "I cannot," Theron stated, his voice toneless. The words crashed through the silence of the clearing, each syllable a physical blow. "I reject this bond." The world lurched. Her mind recoiled, unable to reconcile his declaration with the future she envisioned. This was impossible. Not here, not now, not under the scrutiny of the pack. Her gaze frantically searched the circle, seeking reassurance, a sign of error. Instead, she found faces locked in astonishment, pity, and, chillingly, disgust. Her own kin, the people she had known since birth, regarded her as a stranger, an unwelcome trespasser. Theron released her hand, his touch now a brand of shame. He recoiled, distancing himself as if she carried contagion. "You are deficient, Nyra," he pronounced, his voice slicing through the stillness. "Unworthy. Your lineage is diluted, your spirit wanting. I will not shackle myself to such a flawed being." His words were a public flaying, each cutting away a piece of her spirit. The air grew heavy, suffocating her with the weight of his disdain. Tears blurred Nyra's vision, but she fought them back, denying him the satisfaction of seeing her crumble. She would not shatter, not here, not now. A low murmur spread through the pack, a wave of whispers that crashed over Nyra, carrying the sting of judgment. She felt their eyes dissecting her, confirming Theron's harsh assessment. Humiliation burned her cheeks with the heat of a forge. She stood exposed, vulnerable, stripped bare before those she sought to impress. The carefully crafted illusion of confidence shattered, revealing the insecure girl beneath. She was inconsequential, worthless, unwanted. Without a sound, Nyra bolted. She fled blindly, stumbling through the undergrowth, the whispers chasing her like baying hounds. Forest, once a sanctuary, now mocked her with its cold indifference. Thorns tore at her flesh, branches lashed at her face, but she registered nothing. The physical pain was inconsequential compared to the agony clawing at her heart. She ran until her bond, lungs screamed. Her legs buckled, until the sounds of the pack faded. Finally, she collapsed at the base of an ancient pine, her body convulsing with sobs. The earth beneath her was cold and unforgiving. She huddled into herself, attempting to herself, stifle the pain, the shame, the crushing weight of Theron's rejection. But there was no escape. His words echoed in her mind, each syllable a fresh laceration. Asterisk, deficient, unworthy, wanting. Asterisk, was it true? Was she truly as flawed as he claimed? Had she been living a fiction, pretending to be something she was not? The questions spiraled, feeding her insecurities, eroding her fragile sense of self. As dusk settled, Nyra felt a chilling draft seep into her bones. The forest teemed with life, the rustle of leaves, the owl's lament, the distant wolf's cry, yet she felt utterly isolated. Abandoned, merely a broken plaything, discarded by the one she loved. Sleep offered no solace, only a torturous loop of the day's humiliation. Theron's features, twisted with revulsion, haunted her dreams. His condemnation echoed in the darkness, a persistent reminder of her perceived worthlessness. She awoke to a dreary dawn, her body stiff and sore, her spirit shattered. The burden of rejection pressed upon her, suffocating her with despair. She had no pack, no haven, no purpose. She was an outcast, a pariah, a shadow of her former self. Yet, even in the abyss of her despondency, a spark of defiance ignited. She would not allow Theron to define her. She would not let his rejection be her undoing. She would endure. She would cultivate her own strength, her own value. And one day, he would regret the moment he cast her aside. The path ahead would be arduous, but she was no longer the naive, hopeful girl who had knelt before Theron. She was something else now, something different, something resilient. Exile's embrace the forest floor was no sanctuary, merely a cold bed of packed earth and decaying leaves. Shiver-racked Nyra. The flimsy tunic from the binding ceremony offered little defense against the autumnal bite. Hunger clawed at her insides, eclipsing even the ache of heartbreak, a constant goad to her miserable plight. Days before, she had been Nyra of the Silver Creek Pack, a Beta's daughter, a future Luna. Now, she was not. A pariah, an exile. Theron's cutting words echoed in her head, dripping with scorn as he'd severed their bond before the assembled pack. Unworthy. Your blood is tainted, your spirit frail. She drew her knees to her chest, the woods pressing in like a suffocating shroud of shadows and crackling foliage, each rustle a potential menace. She groped for the survival skills her father had instilled, the art of reading the forest's subtle language, but her mind churned with humiliation and grief. She pushed through the tangled cangas. Undergrowth, desperately seeking sustenance. A handful of shriveled berries clung stubbornly to a thorny bush, their tartness barely denting the cavernous emptiness inside her. Still, she ate them, driven by primal need. Suddenly, a vivid call. Memory. Her mother, bustling in the pack kitchen, the savory scent of roasting venison permeating the air. Laughter, warmth, acceptance. A world apart from the piercing wind now lashing through the trees, a cruel jeer at her solitude. She recalled the plush furs of her bed, the comforting proximity of her packmates. Now, the unyielding earth was her mattress, the silent trees and unseen night creatures her only company. A sharp snap broke the silence, and Nyra's head jerked up, her pulse hammering in her ears. Gleaming eyes stared back from the gloom. Not a wolf, she realized with a jolt, but something far larger, untamed. A bear, colossal and imposing, its breath puffing white in the frigid air. A wave of paralyzing fear crashed over her. Fight was impossible. Her only hope lay in flight. She scrambled upright, her legs leaden and clumsy. The bear's roar ripped through the stillness, shaking the very ground. She didn't dare glance back as she bolted, limbs flailing, thorns tearing at her flesh. The bear's thunderous pursuit grew closer. Escape seemed impossible. Then she spied a narrow cleft in a rocky outcropping. She squeezed inside, the rough stone abrading her skin, and wedged herself as far back as possible. The bear's claws scraped against the rock, but it couldn't reach her. She huddled there, trembling uncontrollably, her breath ragged in her throat. Eventually, the bear's interest waned, and its heavy footfalls faded into the forest's embrace. Nyra remained in the fissure for what felt like an eternity, paralyzed by fear. When she finally emerged, the sun was sinking below the horizon, painting long, spectral shadows across the forest floor. Exhaustion, hunger, and terror clung to her like a second skin. But she had survived. As night descended, she discovered a shallow depression beneath the gnarled roots of an ancient oak. She gathered a pile of brittle leaves, hoping for a flicker of warmth, a futile endeavor. The cold seeped into her core, a chilling poison. She shut her eyes, trying to drown out the chorus of the forest, the rustling canopy, the owl's lament, the wolves' distant howls. Were they from her pack? Had Theron already chosen a successor? The thought twisted in her gut like a shard of ice. Sleep offered no respite. She dreamt of the binding ceremony, of the bright anticipation that had swelled within her as she approached Theron, her future seemingly assured. She relived his touch, the brief connection before he had demolished everything. Unworthy. The word was a constant refrain in her dreamscape, a litany of her failure. She awoke with a gasp, shivering uncontrollably. The sky was still dark, but a faint glimmer of dawn kissed the horizon. She was alone, cast adrift, lost. Yet, deep within, a tiny ember of defiance flickered to life. Theron might have rejected her, her pack might have abandoned her. But she would not be broken. She would endure. She would find a way to prove them all wrong. Fueled by this nascent resolve, Nyra forced herself to her feet. Her body screamed in protest, her stomach gnawed with renewed ferocity, but she persevered. She needed water, she needed shelter, she needed a path to survival. As she walked, she noticed a faint track, barely discernible among the fallen leaves. Not an animal trail, but something else, something intentional. Hope bloomed, fragile but persistent. Perhaps she wasn't as isolated as she believed. She followed the barely there path, her senses heightened, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. The trail led her deeper into the woods, toward an uncharted destination, into an unpredictable future. Yet, for the first time since her banishment, Nyra experienced a flicker of optimism. Perhaps exile was not an ending, but a commencement. Perhaps it was a chance to carve her own destiny, to define her own value, to become someone Theron could never have envisioned. She paused, listening. A remote sound, a low guttural growl, drifted to her ears. It wasn't a bear, and it wasn't a wolf she recognized. It was something altogether different, unheard before. Instinctively she tensed. She crept forward, peering through the trees, until a small clearing came into view. There, she saw them. A pack of wolves, unlike any she had ever encountered. Larger, more powerfully built, their fur matted and scarred. Their eyes burned with an unsettling light. Rogues, wolves who had forsaken their packs, or who had been cast out, existing on the fringes, beyond the laws and customs of pack life. And standing before them, her back to Nyra, was a woman, tall and commanding. Her long hair interwoven with feathers and bone, she radiated raw power. Her voice, a low, resonant rumble, sliced through the air. "We will not cower. We will not plead. We will seize what is rightfully ours." The rogues roared in answer, their voices crackling with ferocious energy. Nyra realized, with a sudden surge of adrenaline, that she had stumbled upon something extraordinary. And perhaps, just perhaps, she had found a new place. If not to belong, then at least to survive. She inhaled deeply and stepped into the clearing. Her exile may well prove to be her salvation. Velka's mercy, the forest floor, swam before Nyra's eyes, a dizzying swirl of umber and viridian. Her leaden legs betrayed her at last, and she collapsed beneath the gnarled embrace of an ice-rimed oak. The hollowness in her belly was a persistent throb, a bitter testament to her failure. Her vision narrowed, the periphery fading to black, and her final lucid thought was a desperate prayer for resilience. A low growl, resonant and intimate, tore through the encroaching oblivion. Nyra's eyelids flickered, struggling to bring the sound's origin into focus. A wolf of imposing size, its coat the hue of aged slate, stood etched against the dimming afternoon. Its eyes, keen and knowing, held her in a dispassionate appraisal. From the shadows behind, more wolves materialized, their forms gaunt and wary. Rogues, she surmised, judging by their disheveled appearance and the raw, untamed aura they exuded. A jolt of pure terror surged through Nyra, but her body remained stubbornly unresponsive. The slate-coated wolf advanced, its movements measured and deliberate. It lowered its head, sampling the air around Nyra, then raised its gaze, its expression impenetrable. An eternity seemed to hang in the balance as the wolf assessed her worth. At last, it inclined its head slightly, emitting a clipped bark in apparent command. Two others approached, their eyes narrowed with suspicion. One prodded her with its muzzle, testing for resistance. Finding none, they exchanged a glance, and then, with surprising delicacy, began to maneuver her onto their backs. Pain shot through Nyra, but she choked back a cry. She gripped their fur, her fingers digging in, as they started forward, bearing her deeper into the woods. The journey dissolved into a haze of agony and weariness. Nyra slipped between consciousness and oblivion, vaguely aware of the coarse texture of the wolf's fur against her cheek, the steady cadence of their paws on the leaf-strewn ground, and fleeting snippets of conversation in muffled, guttural tones. She caught glimpses of the passing terrain, soaring pines, snow-dusted brush, and the ever-present shadows that clung to the trees like guarded secrets. When full awareness returned, she found herself nestled on a bed of yielding moss, protected by a makeshift shelter of branches and animal pelts. The air hung heavy with the scent of burning wood and moist earth. A fire danced merrily in a small clearing, casting wavering patterns on the wolves encircling it. The slate-coated wolf stood at a distance, its back to the fire, observing her with an intensity that prickled her skin. Another wolf, its fur a patchwork of sable and ash, approached carrying a bowl filled with steaming broth. It knelt beside Nyra, its expression surprisingly tender. "Drink," it urged, its voice rough but gentle. "You're weak. You need strength." Nyra hesitated, torn between suspicion and desperation. "Who are you?" she rasped, her voice a mere whisper. The wolf cocked its head. "We are survivors. This is our haven now." It extended the bowl further. "Drink. It is not poisoned." Driven by a ravenous hunger and a fragile hope, Nyra slowly pushed herself upright, accepting the bowl with trembling hands. The broth was thin and watery, yet it tasted divine. She gulped it down greedily, feeling warmth flood her chilled core. Finishing, She looked up at the slate-coated wolf, still regarding her intently. "Why?" she asked. "Why did you save me?" The wolf stepped closer, its eyes gleaming in the firelight. "Valka," she stated, her voice a low, resonant rumble. "My name is Valka, and I saved you because I glimpsed something within you. A spark, a flicker of defiance staring into the abyss. Something that echoed in my own past." Nyra gazed at Valka, trying to grasp the meaning of her words. "Defiance?" she repeated. "I was rejected, outcast. I am nothing." Valka snorted, a harsh, dismissive sound. "Rejected, perhaps. Outcast, maybe. But nothing? Do not insult my intelligence by devaluing yourself. Rejection is but a scar, not a fatal wound. It is a trial. And you still draw breath, do you not? That signifies you have not yet failed." She paused, her gaze hardening. "I offer no charity. I offer an opportunity. You may remain here, with us. Learn to endure. Learn to fight. Earn your place among us. Or you may depart and perish alone in the wilderness. The choice is yours." Nyra scanned the assembled wolves, their faces displaying a mix of curiosity and mistrust. She recalled Theron's cutting words, the pack's callous indifference, the soul-crushing loneliness of the previous days. She remembered the bear, the constant gnawing hunger, and she recalled the flicker of defiance Valka had discerned in her eyes. "I'll stay," she declared, her voice now stronger, imbued with a newfound resolve. "I'll earn my place." Valka nodded, a glimmer of approval in her eyes. "Good. Then you shall learn. The wilderness is a brutal mentor, yet it imparts invaluable lessons. Lessons that will forge you into something more resilient than you believe possible. But first," Valka added, gesturing to the wolf who offered the broth, "you must heal. Kale will attend to your wounds. Rest. Tomorrow, we commence." Kale offered a soft, reassuring smile. "The fire offers warmth, and the moss, comfort. Sleep now. Further discourse will wait until morning." Nyra settled back down, the fire's heat seeping into her numb limbs. She closed her eyes, but slumber remained elusive. Her mind raced, teeming with questions and uncertainties. What did Valka expect of her? What did it entail to earn her place among the rogues? And what manner of strength would she require to survive in this unforgiving realm? Despite her trepidations, a fragile ember of hope flickered within her. Perhaps, just perhaps, this was an opportunity to reconstruct her life, to sculpt her own destiny, to evolve into something beyond the rejected mate of a heartless alpha. Perhaps, within this band of outcasts, she could at last unearth her true self. The notion, however tenuous, gave her the fortitude to confront the approaching dawn. Forged in fire sunbeams, keen-edged as blades, knifed through the thick leaves, dappling the forest floor as Valka's voice, laced with steel, shattered the dawn chorus. "Again, Nyra! You possess the agility of a slumbering badger, not a predator." Nyra, every fiber of her being ablaze with fatigue, hauled herself upright. Grime plastered her coat, a testament to the unforgiving hours already endured. Each inhalation was a scorching brand in her chest, a harsh reminder of her perceived inadequacy. Accustomed to coddling and entitlement, this stark existence was a brutal awakening. Theron's dismissals echoed within her skull. Asterisk weak, unfit, worthless. Asterisk those barbs, sharp as thorns, ignited a fierce desire to shatter his assessment, to rewrite her own self-perception. Valka stalked around her, a glacial scrutiny in her gaze, dissecting Nyra's shortcomings. The wild cares nothing for wounded pride or noble birth. It demands strength, demonstrates some. Nyra launched forward, her attack clumsy and predictable. Valka flowed aside with fluid grace, a low growl vibrating in her throat. Focus, Nyra. Overthinking paralyzes. React. Trust your gut. The ensuing hours dissolved into a crucible of pain and frustration. Valka pressed her relentlessly, forcing Nyra to defend, to adapt, to simply endure. She began to understand leverage, how to deflect strikes, how to root herself even as her body begged for respite. Each stumble and fall served as a goad, the memory of Theron's contempt driving her onward. By midday, her pelt was a road map of bruises and lacerations, yet a change had taken root within her. A nascent rebellion, a spark of untamed will, flared in her eyes. Enough for now, Valka conceded at last, a hint of warmth entering her tone. But tomorrow, the lesson resumes. The hunt proved equally unforgiving. Nyra, used to others providing her meals, floundered, struggling to follow spoor, to navigate the underbrush soundlessly, to execute a kill. Jaran, a callow rogue with hopeful eyes, was tasked with mentoring her. He was eager to please, his words tumbling out in a torrent. Alpha Valka sees potential in you, Nyra. We all do. You just need to, unleash the wolf within. Nyra offered him a tired look. My wolf is probably still weeping over heartbreak. Joran flushed, nervously adjusting the worn quiver on his back. Right. Well, even wounded hearts need sustenance. Look, the breeze is broadcasting our presence. We need to circle upwind for any hope of approaching the deer. Patiently, he illuminated the secrets of camouflage, teaching her to decipher the forest's subtle language, the lexicon of tracks and scents. She learned to differentiate the whisper of a rodent from the crack of a twig beneath a deer's hoof. He demonstrated how to exploit the power. Terrain, how to dissolve into the shadows, how to become one with the wilderness. Days blurred into weeks, and gradually, Nyra underwent a metamorphosis. The pampered she-wolf began to shed, revealing a sinewy, resilient version of herself. She cultivated the ability to disregard the persistent hunger, the bone-wearying fatigue, the relentless throb in her muscles. She cultivated reliance on her senses, faith in her soul, instincts, and a will to fight for every breath. The fear that had once gripped her began to loosen its hold, displaced by a smoldering anger. One evening, following a successful hunt, Nyra shared a fire with the other rogues. They were a disparate band. Exiles from various packs, bound by their shared experience of rejection and their fierce individualism. Braga, a massive brute bearing a scar tissue tapestry on his face, possessed a surprising gentleness. Lyra, a wiry she-wolf with a biting wit and a gift for healing. And old Ronin, a grizzled veteran who had endured more battles than he cared to recall. They traded stories of their past lives, their betrayals, their losses. Nyra, initially hesitant, tentatively began to confide, sharing her own narrative of rejection and banishment. To her astonishment, they listened without judgment, empathy etched in their eyes. We've all tasted that poison, sister. Braga's voice, surprisingly melodious, rumbled. Spurned, forsaken, left for vultures. But we persevered, and we emerged stronger. Lyra concurred, her eyes catching the firelight. This isn't the denouement of your tale, Nyra. It's merely the prologue. You have the chance to forge something entirely new, something superior. Don't let him dictate your destiny. That night, As she gazed up at the star-strewn expanse, Nyra finally grasped the truth. Theron's rejection hadn't shattered her. It had liberated her. It had peeled away the veneers of her previous existence, exposing the raw, indomitable wolf within. No longer the naive she-wolf who had fantasized about being an alpha's consort, she was something altered, something tempered in hardship, something dangerous. She closed her eyes, a ghost of a smile gracing her muzzle. The path ahead would be arduous, but she was prepared. She would master survival. She would learn command. And someday, she would ensure Theron rued the instant he dismissed her. Queen's Ascent, the passage of time etched itself onto Nyra, a relentless sculptor. Moons waxed and waned, furs were shed for lighter coats, claws honed to razor. Sharpness and a chilling resolve settled in her heart. The hesitant she-wolf who'd once sought refuge in Valka's domain had vanished, superseded by a warrior queen whose gaze reflected the frigid gleam of glacial ice. Gone were the scad days of silk and pampering. Her frame now carried the honed physique of a seasoned hunter. Purpose governed her every motion, her senses reaching peak sensitivity. The faintest whisper of the wind through the trees, the crackle of a fallen branch, all were instantly processed. Raids commenced with a whisper, like a rising tide. Stolen deer pilfered from the Crescent Moon Pack's outer hunting grounds. Lightning ambushes against supply wagons, each meticulously planned and executed. Under Joran's patient hand, Nyra blossomed into a masterful tracker, fluent in the language of the wilderness, aware of any weakness in her quarry, be it beast or wolf. Yet it was Valka's unyielding training that truly distinguished her. Her mind dissected chaos into manageable pieces, predicting maneuvers with uncanny accuracy, exploiting vulnerabilities with cold precision. One evening, beneath a leaden sky threatening to burst, they intercepted a 5-wolf patrol guarding a stash of silver ore. "Remember the drill," Nyra breathed, her voice lost in the rising gale. "Joran, Mara, flanking maneuver. I draw the fire. Kai, seal the escape route." The strategy unfolded with lethal grace. Nyra, an eruption of fur and fangs, engaged the Alpha, a mountain of muscle named Breck, while Joran and Mara swiftly neutralized his cohorts. Kai, a wraith of shadow and silence, ensured there were no survivors. Breck, stunned by Nyra's savage onslaught, found himself disarmed and pinned beneath her interlock. "Mere heartbeats. Tell Theron," she growled, her breath frosting against his cheek. "This is only the prelude." Rumors of these daring strikes spread like wildfire across the landscape of rogue packs. Some dismissed them as the desperate acts of starving scavengers. Others spoke in hushed tones of a phantom she-wolf, a specter striking from the darkness. But among the oppressed, the banished, the forgotten, a spark of defiance ignited. Nyra's actions echoed their own bitterness, their yearning for recognition in a world that had shunned them. Before long, wolves began seeking her out, lured by the whisper of strength, purpose, and kinship. Valka observed Nyra's expanding sway with mingled pride and apprehension. "You're amassing a following, little wolf," she commented one dawn, as they sharpened their claws by the river's edge. "Power is a treacherous beast. It can taint even the purest soul." Nyra paused, her gaze locked on the churning water. "I know," she murmured, her voice somber. "I've witnessed its corruption. I won't let it consume me." Valka snorted, unconvinced. "Promises are fleeting, Nyra. Actions are the only truth." The true hurdle wasn't winning skirmishes. but uniting the scattered rogue factions. A fractious collective, each pack stubbornly clinging to its own customs, its ancient grudges. The South Ridge Pack, led by the battle-scarred Torvin, possessed a reputation for relentless brutality, while the Whispering Pines Pack, under the guidance of the enigmatic healer Lyra, eschewed violence entirely. Nyra understood that to truly threaten the established order, she needed to mold these disparate elements into a unified force. She dedicated weeks to traversing their territories, lending an ear to their grievances, seeking to understand their fears, offering resolutions, negotiating compromises. One night, under the watchful eye of a full moon, Nyra summoned the rogue packs to a clandestine gathering in a secluded forest glade. Tension hung thick in the air as the leaders, each flanked by their most trusted warriors, eyed one another with wary suspicion. Torvin, his face a canvas of old wounds, snarled, "Why should we heed your words, whelp? You're barely weaned." Nyra met his gaze without flinching. "Because I offer you something you've been denied for too long. Opportunity. The chance to reclaim what was stolen from you. To build a new existence. To transcend your outcast status." She swept a hand towards the assembled wolves. "Look around you. We are different, each carrying our own burdens, bearing our unique scars. Yet we share a common bond. We were deemed unworthy. We were cast aside. But that doesn't diminish our worth. It grants us the privilege to forge our own destinies." She paused, her voice gaining momentum. "I offer not dominion, but direction. Not wealth, but respect. I offer a sanctuary, a family, a pack. Who stands with me?" Silence descended upon the clearing, heavy and expectant. Then Lyra, her voice a gentle stream, stepped forward. "I have seen the healing you inspire, Nyra. I believe in your vision." One by one, the other leaders followed, their initial skepticism giving way to a fragile hope. Even Torvin, his face still etched with doubt, offered a reluctant nod. The acclamation of Nyra as their ruler was unexpectedly universal. It was not a position she had aggressively campaigned for, but the rogues, weary of internal conflict and longing for stability, beheld in her a unifier, a protector, and a visionary capable of leading them towards a brighter horizon. The crowning was an understated ceremony conducted beneath the venerable oak at the heart of their territory. Valka, her eyes softened with Ka, affection, placed a circlet of intertwined vines and silver leaves upon Nyra's brow. "Do you accept this burden, Nyra?" she questioned, her voice imbued with the gravitas of the moment. Nyra met her gaze, her own eyes ablaze with resolve. "I do," she avowed, her voice resonating with certainty, and as the assembled wolves unleashed a thunderous roar of approval, the title reverberated through the ancient woods, a vow and a challenge interwoven, Queen of Rogues. Theron's fist slammed against the council table, the impact resonating through the hall. "Enough," he thundered. Silence descended. The pack leaders, usually a cacophony of opinions, fixed their attention on him, their unease a tangible weight, a miasma of fear and simmering resentment. Silver Creek, once a shining example of unity, was unraveling. Border skirmishes escalated daily, each more audacious than the last. The Blackwood Pack, fueled by some unseen power, was systematically dismantling their territory, their resources, their very way of life. He raked his fingers through his dark hair, strands falling across his brow in disarray. Nearly a year had passed since she departed. A year since he'd made the choice he believed necessary, the one he swore would safeguard his pack, a decision that still gnawed at him. He banished the memory of Nyra's devastated face. Sentiment was a luxury he couldn't afford. An explanation, he commanded, his voice a low growl. How are the Blackwood wolves breaching our defenses so easily? Where is the patrol assigned to the western expanse? Elder Bram shuffled forward, his muzzle dusted with gray, his voice laced with trepidation. Alpha. The patrol, they were waylaid. Annihilated. No one survived. Theron's jaw hardened. Ambushed? By whom? Blackwood is formidable, not insurmountable. It wasn't solely Blackwood. Alpha Lyra, a young warrior brimming with ambition, chimed in. There were others. Rogues. Unlike any we've seen before. Theron's scoff crackled with disbelief. Rogues? A scattering of strays is causing this disruption? He refused to accept it. Rogues were pests, scavengers preying on weakness, a fleeting distraction at best. They were organized, Alpha, Lyra insisted, her gaze steady and green. They moved with coordination, with a defined strategy, not driven by mere hunger or desperation. Bram cleared his throat, a dry, rustling sound. There are whispers, Alpha, circling among the sentinels. Tales of a leader, a queen. Theron arched a brow, a flicker of amusement crossing his features. A queen of rogues, and you give credence to this fable. They're wild canines, not royalty. A mirthless chuckle escaped him. The notion was ludicrous. She's uniting them, Alpha, Lyra pressed on, unfazed by his skepticism. Disparate factions, fractured packs all rallying to her banner. They say she's formidable, merciless. She promises a dawn of reckoning. And what does this dawn of reckoning entail? Theron queried, dripping with sarcasm. Retribution, Alpha, Bram responded, his voice heavy with dread. Against the packs that shunned them. Against the Alphas who treat them as vermin. A cold wave washed over Theron, though he fought to conceal it. He dismissed the warning bells. He couldn't afford to indulge in such preposterous rumors. He had enough burdens without fretting over a self-proclaimed monarch and her rabble. Fabrications, he declared, his voice firm as iron. Exaggerations fueled by fear and paranoia. I won't allow my pack to be consumed by campfire myths. He paused, his gaze sweeping over them, piercing and unwavering. Focus on the true enemy, Blackwood. We reinforce the borders, bolster our patrols, and remind them that Silver Creek will not be mocked. He turned to Lyra. Your concern regarding this rogue queen is notable. Investigate. Discover her identity, her purpose. But absolutely do not engage. A war consumes us. We cannot afford to chase shadows. Lyra nodded, her expression inscrutable. As you command, Alpha. As the council dissipated, Theron remained rooted to his seat, the weight of his office pressing heavily on his shoulders. He felt the pack's faltering faith, the relentless attacks, the dwindling supplies, the pervasive anxiety it was all taking its toll. He needed to project strength, even as his own spirit cracked. He had to maintain order amidst the encroaching chaos. He approached the window, surveying the vast expanse of his territory. The forest stretched before him, an inky labyrinth. He could almost feel unseen eyes upon him, sense the hushed whispers carried on the breeze, whispers of the rogue queen. He scoffed. Again, attempting to dispel the mounting dread. Let her indulge her petty game. Let her play sovereign in the shadows. He had far graver concerns. A pack to safeguard, a legacy to uphold. But as he gazed into the encroaching darkness, a seed of doubt took root. What if these whispers were more than mere fabrication? What if this queen of rogues was not just a phantom menace? What if she was a reckoning in the making? He forced the thought aside, channeling his attention to the immediate danger. Blackwood first, then, and only then, would he address the murmurs from the shadows. He would quell this uprising before it gained traction. He would remind the rogues of their subservience. He would demonstrate that Silver Creek remained the dominant force. He merely hoped he wasn't underestimating them, hoped he wasn't making a blunder he would later rue. The wind howled beyond the glass, carrying the chilling echo of distant howls. And for the first time in what felt like an age, Farron felt a sharp jab of fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of the approaching storm. He closed his eyes, his jaw clenched tight. He would not succumb to fear. He was the alpha. He was resilient. He would triumph. He had to. The survival of his pack hinged on it. Silver Creek's fall the night didn't slip over Silver Creek. It pounced. A tremor, initially subtle enough to be dismissed as distant thunder, proved a false comfort. The wind, however, betrayed the deception, carrying a sharp, metallic tang blood mingling with the raw, untamed scent of Blackwood wolves. That odious aroma knifed through the packlands, a brutal awakening. Theron, from his packhouse balcony, felt the air vibrate with a sickening blend of anticipation and dread. He'd foreseen Dal. This hour. Braced against it, yet no preparation could fully armor him against the coming storm. The first assault slammed into their defenses like a tidal wave. Blackwood wolves, outnumbering Silver Creek's warriors 2-1, flooded from the woods, their eyes blazing with a predatory hunger that the brushfires amplified, turning the forest into a raging inferno. A defiant howl ripped from Silver Creek's throat, a desperate counterpoint to the invasion. Wolves shifted, colliding with the enemy in a furious dance of tooth and claw. Farron, jaw tight, witnessed his warriors fighting with savage devotion. Young Aiden, barely a man, was dragged down by a trio of attackers, his death cry lost to the cry. Din. Ilara? His most skilled hunter fell prey to a cowardly strike, her silver coat blooming crimson. Each loss chipped away at his resolve, a weight dragging him down. Hold! He bellowed, his alpha command amplified, a desperate attempt to shore up their crumbling lines. But even his roar felt paltry against such a relentless horde. The Blackwood pack, fueled by ingrained animosity and a ravenous desire, attacked with cold precision, carving through Silver Creek's defenses with frightening speed. The pack house, once a bastion of strength, was now under siege, flames greedily consuming its walls, the air saturated with smoke and tormented cries. Theron abandoned the balcony, his heart a stone in his chest. Shifting into his massive silver wolf form, his eyes burned with icy fury, he dove into the chaos. He became a vortex of snapping jaws and tearing claws, ripping through the Blackwood forces, his rage a bulwark against the invaders. He fought like a man condemned, driven by the need to safeguard his pack, avenge the fallen, and stem the tide of encroaching darkness. Yet even his alpha prowess seemed insufficient. The Blackwood wolves were legion, their assault unceasing, their hatred a palpable force. A searing agony flared in his flank as a Blackwood wolf breached his guard, its claws raking his flesh, a painful reminder of his fallibility. He snarled, flinging the attacker aside, but the wound hampered him, sapping his strength, forcing him to confront their dire predicament. They were faltering. He saw the terror mirrored in his pack's eyes, the despair threatening to extinguish their fire, and knew that without a radical act, Silver Creek was doomed. Retreating to the fringe of the battle, chest heaving, blood dripping from his wounds, He surveyed the devastation. The packlands had become a charred wasteland, the air choked with smoke and the acrid smell of death. The pack house was being devoured, its majestic facade collapsing into ruin. His warriors were scattered, bleeding, their numbers plummeting with alarming speed. Closing his eyes, a wave of crushing despair washed over him, leaving a bitter taste of defeat. He had failed them. He had failed his people. Yet even in the face of annihilation, a spark of resistance flickered within him, a refusal to yield, a desperate search for a path to salvation. He opened his eyes, his gaze hardening, and focused on the shadowy depths of the forest, the territory of the rogues, the very entity he had always scorned, the choice he had always refused to consider. The rumors had persisted, growing in volume and intensity. A rogue queen, binding together disparate packs, forging them into a formidable force. He had dismissed them as folklore, as desperate grasps for solace in a hopeless world. But now, peering into the abyss, he recognized that hope, however improbable, was all they had left. Shifting back into human form, the frigid air nipped at his bare skin, the stench of blood and embers clinging like a shroud. He stood tall, despite the agony, the defeat, the gnawing guilt, and spoke a single name, his voice raspy but resolute. Nyra. A lithe she-wolf materialized from the shadows, her eyes as sharp as obsidian shards. Expression grave. "Alpha?" she queried, her voice barely audible. "Find her," he ordered, his voice infused with newfound determination. "Find the Queen of Rogues." Lyra's eyes widened, a blend of astonishment and trepidation flickering within them. "Alpha, you can't be serious," she protested. "The rogues are our adversaries." "They are. Unpredictable." Theron fixed her with an unwavering gaze. "We have no other option," he stated, his voice laced with somber acceptance. "Silver Creek is falling. Survival demands her assistance. Find her, Lyra, and tell her that Alpha Theron of Silver Creek requests an audience." Lyra hesitated, her gaze searching his, as if trying to plumb the depths of his resolve. Then, with a curt nod, she pivoted and vanished back into the darkness, leaving Theron alone amidst the wreckage of his pack, confronting the monumental task of seeking aid from the one he had wronged, the force he had minimized, the woman he had rejected. He knew this decision would exact a toll that would test his pride, his authority, and his very soul. But he was prepared to pay it, if it meant shielding Silver Creek from obliteration. As Lyra melted away, Theron was haunted by the memory of wounded golden eyes. The image seared into his mind. He knew, with a chilling certainty, that soliciting help from the Queen of Rogues meant confronting Nyra, the she-wolf he had spurned, the one he had deemed unworthy. And a grim premonition suggested she wouldn't readily forgive his past sins. The twilight of Silver Creek had begun, and Theron sensed, deep down, that this was merely the opening act of a much larger reckoning. A king's plea. The reek of pine and loam yielded to a harsh, metallic bite that assaulted Theron's senses. Fear, raw and primal, underpinned the feral tang of unwashed hides and a brazen, almost insolent, liberty. He pressed onward, deeper into the riotous thicket marking the border of outcast territory. Each footfall was a wager, a transgression punishable by exsanguination. He, once the revered Alpha, now a petitioner, a mendicant at his adversary's doorstep. The trees gave way to a makeshift barricade of sharpened stakes and plaited vines. Wolves, shaggy and battle-scarred, patrolled the perimeter, suspicion blazing in their eyes. A far cry from the sleek, pampered warriors of Silver Creek, These were survivors, toughened by deprivation, bonded by shared exile. Theron steeled himself, meeting their hard stares. He inclined his head, a submissive gesture he hadn't performed since presenting to his own alpha as a mere pup. "I request audience with the Queen," he declared, his voice raspy. A chorus of low growls rippled in response. A particularly massive rogue, his snout bisected by a vicious scar, advanced. "Name yourself and your business, Silver Creek cur," he spat, the designation dripping with scorn. Theron straightened, ignoring the lancing pain in his side. The Blackwood ambush had left him weakened, but he refused to betray it. "I am Theron, Alpha of Silver Creek. My purpose is pressing. It concerns my pack's continued existence." The scarred rogue scoffed derisively. "Existence? You seek it amongst the outcasts? The same outcasts you persecuted and reviled? Begone, Alpha. Your ilk is not welcome." "I understand your misgivings," Theron parried, choosing words as cautiously. "Paw steps on brittle ice. But Blackwood's power swells. They will engulf us all. My pack, we suffered grievous losses. We require allies. And the Queen and she recognizes strength." A pregnant silence descended. The rogue's gaze narrowed, x-raying Theron for deception, for vulnerability. "At long last," a curt nod. "Stay, I will apprise the Queen of your plea, but presume nothing. You remain on rogue soil, and your life dangles by a thread." Theron stood rigid, the weight of his pack's destiny a crushing burden. The sun blazed on his back, turning his pelt into a fiery cloak. Time stretched to infinity. He felt the rogue's stares, dissecting him, judging him. He conjured the image of Nyra, her unwavering belief in him, the glimmer of hope he carried for his pack. He could not fail them. Finally, the scarred rogue reappeared, his face inscrutable. "The Queen grants you audience. Follow." The rogue steered him through a labyrinth of roughshod dwellings and training yards. The air hung thick with wood smoke, roasting meat, and the pungency of untamed canines. He glimpsed pups frolicking in the dust, their eyes bright with mischief, and older wolves honing their claws on gnarled logs. This was a society, cobbled together from shattered lives, a monument to indomitable spirit. They halted before a vast open-sided tent fashioned from hides and interwoven branches. Two formidable she-rogues, their expressions implacable, stood sentinel at the entrance. The scarred rogue inclined his head to them and motioned Theron inside. He entered, his heart hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs. The tent was dimly lit, but his heightened lupine senses swiftly adjusted. A low dais, draped in furs, served as a throne, and enthroned upon it was Nyra. Years had passed since he last saw her, since that day, that catastrophic moment when he'd rejected her before the entire pack. He had convinced himself it was for the best, that she was too tender, too fragile to be an alpha's consort. Now, confronting her, he understood the magnitude of his error. The girl of his memory, the timid, gentle she-wolf with the kind eyes, had vanished. In her stead sat a queen. Her bearing was regal, her gaze unwavering, her aura radiating raw authority. Her once delicate features were now sculpted with grim resolve, framed by a curtain of jet hair that seemed to swallow the light. She wore a simple hide tunic, but it was embellished with complex beadwork and feathers, emblems of her power. But it was her eyes that held him captive. No longer pools of warmth and devotion, they were now chips of cold, calculating intelligence. Something else flickered there, too, a vestige of pain, a spark of triumph. Theron, she greeted, her voice a low, melodious rumble that sent a chill down his spine. To what do I owe this unexpected visit? The words dripped with a sarcasm sharper than any claw. He sank to one knee, forcing himself to meet her gaze. The gesture felt like a brand of humiliation, but he had no other option. Nyra Queen, he corrected. I come to you in desperation. My pack is besieged. We require your aid. A hint of a smile danced on her lips. Aid? From me? The she-wolf you deemed unworthy? The rogue you banished? I erred, he conceded, the words a bitter draught. I was blinded by pride and tradition. I now perceive that true strength in his not in bloodlines, but in the spirit. And you, Nyra, you have proven to possess a fortitude beyond any of us. Fortitude, yes, she echoed, her tone hardening. But strength demands a price, Theron. A price you helped me to settle. Tell me, Alpha, why should I gamble the lives of my people, my rogues, to preserve yours? What makes Silver Creek so deserving? It's not merely about Silver Creek, he entreated. Blackwood will not halt there. They will consume everything in their path. Should they shatter us, you will be next. Perhaps, she conceded, tapping a long, refined digit against the armrest of her crude throne. But perhaps I might simply observe them rend you to pieces. Allow them to exhaust themselves in the endeavor. Then, when they are vulnerable, I will crush them all. Theron felt a surge of ire, but suppressed it immediately. He dared not alienate her. That is a perilous gambit, Nyra, one that could cost you all. Together, we can vanquish them. Together, we can safeguard the continued existence of both our packs. She leaned forward, her eyes piercing his very soul. And what, Alpha, do you proffer in exchange for this alliance? What tribute are you willing to render for my assistance? The silence stretched, thick and stifling. Theron knew that his response would determine the destiny of his pack, the fate of all he cherished. He had sought salvation, but had instead blundered into a den of vipers. And the viper was poised, patiently awaiting his choice. Anything, he breathed, his voice barely audible. I will settle any debt. A charged atmosphere gripped the Queen's chamber, amplified by the thrumming of displaced energy and the palpable standoff between Nyra and Theron. He lingered just inside the entrance, a petitioner in what had once been their shared Havana prospect, now soured by betrayal. The Silver Creek Alpha, once a beacon of assurance, appeared diminished. His coat lacked its luster, his gaze haunted by shadows. The bitter tang of fear mixed with a pleading musk in the air. Nyra, unmoved, remained upon her crude, throne a redwood stump carved into a seat of power, her gaze unwavering as a predator's. The cavernous hall, illuminated by sputtering torches and the eerie luminescence of rogue-infused crystals, stood in stark contrast to Silver Creek's pristine halls, and yet it felt intrinsically hers. You came, she stated, her voice a husky whisper, devoid of welcome. It was not a question, but an acknowledgement. Theron's Adam's apple danced nervously as he swallowed. I had no choice, Nyra. My people. His voice faltered, unable to sustain eye contact. Lifting his chin, he revealed eyes brimming with supplication. They need help. Blackwood's assault is relentless. We can't withstand them much longer. A subtle inclination of Nyra's head betrayed a predatory spark in her amber eyes. And you believe that I, the discarded she-wolf, the alleged weakling you deemed unfit, will offer succor. Her words dripped with venom. each syllable a poisoned dart. He visibly winced, the sting of her words landing squarely. I was wrong, Nyra. Catastrophically wrong. He edged forward, then halted as if bound by invisible chains. I see that now. I was shackled by tradition, paralyzed by apprehension, hemmed in by expectation. Expectations, Nyra echoed, a brittle laugh cracking in the cavern. Is that your euphemism for crushing a wolf's very essence? For condemning her to a solitary demise? She unfurled from her throne, her movements a symphony of fluid power. Descending the 2 steps, she closed the gap until only inches separated them. He towered in height, yet she radiated an authority that dwarfed his frame. You speak of expectations. What of the ones whispered between us in the moon's embrace? The dreams woven under the silver birch? Her voice softened, tinged with a sorrow that caught even her off guard, only to be quickly forged into resolve. Mere rhetoric, wasn't it? Hollow vows to a she-wolf you considered subpar? Theron's head dropped, a visible wave of contrition washing over him. I can't rewrite the past, Nyra, that much is clear. But I implore you, prevent my mistakes from costing my pack their lives. He finally locked eyes with her, a raw, desperate sincerity igniting his gaze, almost breaching the glacial fortress surrounding her heart. Almost, echoed a voice in the recesses of her mind. Valka, her guide, her rescuer. Valka had witnessed Nyra's ascent with a complex mix of pride and trepidation. She saw the encroaching darkness, the thirst for reprisal threatening to consume her protégé. Valka hadn't shadowed Nyra, but remained close, prepared to step in if Theron's arrival ignited a conflagration. Nyra circled Theron slowly, a predator sizing up its quarry. Tell me, Theron, what price are you willing to offer in exchange for my assistance? What tribute will you present to persuade the Queen of Rogues to rescue Silver Creek's waning power? She paused, her eyes narrowing to slits. Because I assure you, my charity comes at a steep cost, one beyond your current comprehension. Hesitation sculpted his face. Anything, he croaked, his voice raspy. Anything within my grasp. Land, resources, warriors, name it. Nyra ceased her circuit and stood directly before him, her gaze a burning brand. Anything? Are you certain, Theron? Because the payment I envision, it's not easily relinquished. It's something you hold as intrinsically yours. He swallowed hard, his gaze flickering downwards. What is it? Nyra invaded his personal space, her breath a ghostly caress on his face. Your pride, Theron. I desire a public admission of your failings. I want you to announce to every pack within these lands that you spurned your true mate, cast her aside, and were demonstrably wrong. I demand that you kneel before me, before the collected rogues, and pledge allegiance to the Queen forged from the embers of your betrayal. Theron recoiled, disbelief etched upon his features. That's impossible. I'm an alpha. I must maintain my standing. My pack, they would never accept it. Ah, Nyra purred, a cruel smile dancing at the corners of her mouth. So, your pack's survival is worth less than your reputation? I suspected as much. She turned her back, dismissing him with a languid wave. Guards, escort Alpha Theron back to the boundary. He's wasting my valuable time. 2 imposing rogues, eyes blazing with feral energy, advanced and seized Theron's arms. He strained against their grip, his gaze beseeching. Wait, Nyra, please. Surely there's an alternative. Nyra halted, but remained turned away. Is there, Theron? Is there another method by which to convince me of your remorse? Another way to demonstrate your willingness to prioritize your pack above your vaunted ego. Theron remained mute, the internal struggle churning visibly on his face. Torn between pride, obligation, and the overwhelming need to safeguard his people, he finally exhaled a long, broken sigh. "And if I concede?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. "If I fulfill your demands, will you aid us? Will you command your rogues against Blackwood?" Nyra turned back to confront him, her expression an impenetrable mask. "Perhaps," she offered, her voice enigmatic. "My decision hinges on my belief in your sincerity. And at this moment, Theron, I find it exceedingly challenging to trust a word you utter." A challenging glint sparked in her eyes. "But I remain open to persuasion." "Demonstrate, Theron. Demonstrate the magnitude of your willingness to sacrifice. Prove that you are not the same arrogant, myopic fool who rejected me all those years ago." Theron stared at her, his gaze a tangled knot of apprehension, resentment, and a nascent flicker of what could have been respect. He understood that this was a gauntlet, a trial by fire, and the fate of his pack rested upon his ability to navigate it successfully. "What do you require of me?" he asked, his voice devoid of inflection. Nyra's smile spread slowly, a predatory curve, but sent a shiver tracing his spine. "We begin with the kneeling," she stated. "Right here, right now, before my assembled rogues. Show them, show everyone, that even an alpha can bend a knee to his queen." Theron hesitated, his jaw tight, every muscle screaming in protest. Then, with agonizing slowness, he began to descend. Gasps swept through the chamber as the rogues beheld the unbelievable sight. Nyra watched him, an impassive facade concealing the storm raging within. This was the precipice. The moment when the past would either be laid to rest or resurrected, fiercer and more ravenous than before. Valka emerged from the shadows, her face etched with concern. She perceived the inner turmoil consuming Nyra, the tug-of-war between vengeance and the lingering embers of affection for the wolf who had once been her world. "Nyra," she murmured, her voice barely cutting through the crackling din. "Be mindful of your desires. At times, true triumph lies not in requital, but in clemency." Nyra's gaze flickered towards Valka, her eyes clouded with conflict. She grasped the truth in Valka's words, yet forgiveness remained an alien concept, a chasm too wide to bridge. The torment of Baron's rejection continued to fester, an unyielding wound. She turned back to Theron, still kneeling, his head bowed in humiliation. "Swear it," she commanded, her voice a shard of ice. "Pledge fealty to the Queen of Rogues, and vow to serve her and her pack with unswerving loyalty." Theron lifted his gaze, pleading etched into every line of his face. He understood that this was the ultimate degradation, the complete surrender of his stature and control. But it was also the sole avenue to salvation for his people. "I swear," he intoned, his voice hoarse but resolute. "I, Theron, Alpha of Silver Creek, pledge fealty to Nyra, Queen of Rogues, and vow to serve." The air thrummed, thick with the aroma of evergreens and a prickling dread that seemed to emanate from Theron. He knelt on the unyielding forest floor, head dipped in a gesture of supplication that belied his alpha status. Nyra saw beyond the feigned humility, spotting the raw appeal blooming in the corners of his eyes, the barely perceptible quiver in his powerful frame. A dark satisfaction blossomed within her, a hard-won reward for years dedicated to forging her power, carving out a domain from the wild, all leading to this reckoning. "Rise," she rumbled, her voice a low, vibrating current that swept through the glade. He obeyed, his ascent slow, his gaze pinned to the earth. "Look at me," she demanded, steel sharpening her tone. He hesitated, then met her eyes, a connection forged after years of separation. But this was no longer the adoring gaze of a young she-wolf towards her intended. It was the cool appraisal of a sovereign weighing the worth of a petitioner. A spark of recognition, almost imperceptible, ignited in the depths of Theron's orbs. "Nyra?" he breathed, the name of fragile inquiry, not a declaration. A cruel curve touched her lips. "It suits me, don't you think? The moniker you discarded." She circled him with predatory grace, her gaze unwavering. "Do you recall, Theron? The girl you deemed too frail, too unworthy to stand at your side, whose wolf wasn't refined enough for your lineage?" Each phrase cut like a whip, a calculated blow aimed at his pride, a reminder of the pain he'd inflicted. He winced, jaw clenching. I was young," he mumbled, the excuse ringing hollow even to him. A brittle laugh escaped Nyra, shattering the forest's silence. "Young? You were an alpha, Theron, responsible for the welfare of an entire pack, yet you chose to obliterate mine." Halting directly before him, she felt the heat radiating from his skin, detected the faint echo of his pack's signature scent, an aroma that once stirred longing, now only ignited a frigid rage. "Observe carefully, Theron," she murmured, her tone laced with danger. "Do you still discern weakness? Is the insignificant she-wolf you rejected still visible?" His eyes traversed her face, tracing the sculpted planes of her cheekbones, the unwavering focus in her expression. He noted the subtle tracery of scars upon her arms, a testament to battles endured and victories claimed. He saw strength chiseled into every feature, born from a crucible of suffering and betrayal. "No," he admitted, his voice a thread. "I see." He faltered, searching for the precise word. "A queen. And do you comprehend the crucible that forged this queen, Theron? The harrowing road I traveled to claim this throne?" She didn't wait for his reply. "I was shattered, Theron, utterly, irrevocably broken. You tore out my heart and ground it to dust, declared me worthless, and exiled me from my only home. I roamed the wilderness, starved, frozen, pursued by shadows and despair. I should have perished, but I persevered." A pause, as she inhaled deeply, the fragrance of pine and damp earth filling her. "I discovered power in the wreckage of my former self. I mastered the arts of hunting, combat, and leadership. I learned to survive. And I cultivated a hatred for you, Theron, a hatred that permeated my very being." His visage paled, a mixture of shock and contrition clouding his eyes. I never intended to wound you so severely, Nyra," she scoffed. "Intentions are meaningless. Theron, deeds are the true measure, and your actions resonated with deafening clarity. They proclaimed my nothingness. They screamed my worthlessness. They declared me unworthy of your affection, your pack, your existence." Retreating a pace, she widened the gap between them, needing to see him wholly, to relish his discomfiture. "But you erred, Theron, catastrophically. For I am far from nothing. My worth is immeasurable. And I am not merely worthy, I am potent, beyond your wildest comprehension." She swept her hand, encompassing the sprawling territory surrounding them. "This," she announced, her voice resonating with command, "is my kingdom. These are my wolves. They pledge their loyalty, their trust, their lives to me. They are the rogues, the pariahs, the outcasts. Those deemed too savage, too rebellious to be governed by you and your kind. But I have united them. I have instilled purpose. I have gifted them with strength. And together, we constitute a force of nature. Theron's gaze traversed the gathered rogues, their eyes gleaming in the dimness, their bodies coiled and primed. He felt the raw energy radiating from them, the untamed ferocity that distinguished them from his own pack. He grasped, perhaps for the first time, the true extent of Nyra's metamorphosis. She hadn't merely endured, she had flourished. She had transformed the pain he inflicted into a weapon poised above his head. "So, Theron," she said, her voice softening to a low, menacing purr. "You seek my aid now, begging for my intervention. You, the Alpha who disavowed me, the Alpha who branded me unworthy, the Alpha who left me to languish and die. You approach me, kneeling in supplication, requesting that I rescue your pack from annihilation." A dramatic pause, the words suspended, a delicious savoring of the moment. "Tell me, Theron, why should I extend a hand?" He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple convulsing. He understood the words she craved, the affirmation she required. He recognized that his pride, his standing, his very survival hinged upon his next utterance. "Because," he whispered, his voice scarcely audible, "I was mistaken. Weakness does not reside within you, Nyra. You are the most formidable wolf I have ever encountered. And my pack is in dire need of your strength." Lifting his gaze, his eyes pleaded for salvation. "Please, Nyra, aid us." Nyra stared, her expression an enigma. The air crackled with anticipation, the destiny of Silver Creek suspended in the balance. He was precisely where she desired him, humbled, desperate, pleading for clemency. Yet, even in this instant of triumph, a sliver of doubt pricked at her conscience. Could she truly condemn his pack to oblivion, even to satiate her thirst for vengeance? Could she forsake the innocent lives that would be forfeited? The answer, she realized, was far more nuanced than she had once believed. The Queen of Rogues stood at a crossroads, faced with a decision that would not only shape the fate of Silver Creek, but also the very essence of her soul. Terms of surrender, the gale clawed at them, a mournful dirge whistling through the scarred woods. Nyra stood unyielding, the silver of her gaze, once shimmering with naive devotion, now tempered to the hardness of forged steel, locked on Theron. Firelight painted his gaunt features, each hollow and line a testament to his ordeal. He was the very image of a deposed leader, a far cry from the indomitable figure she'd idolized in her youth. "You've come begging," she observed, her tone stripped bare of all warmth. The simple statement hung in the frigid air, heavy with years of accumulated grievance. Theron's Adam's apple convulsed as he swallowed. He'd rehearsed this confrontation countless times, each scenario concluding with a desperate entreaty, a contrite apology. But the words snagged in his throat, stifled by the burden of past hubris. "My pack. They need your help," he finally rasped, his voice rough with strain. He despised the supplicating note, the vulnerability laid bare, yet pride was a luxury he could no longer afford, not with his people teetering on the precipice of destruction. Nyra's head tilted, a predatory glint sparking in her eyes. "Help? From the deficient, unworthy, expendable robe you discarded?" Her voice was a honed weapon, each carefully chosen word a painful echo. She registered his flinch, the brief shadow of remorse, but it barely scratched the surface. "You seek succor now, when your vaunted strength has betrayed you. When your precious, pure lineage proves insufficient to shield your own, she continued, the words like stinging hail. The watching rogues stirred, their eyes slitted, sensing her barely leashed fury. Valka, her second, placed a steadying hand on her arm, a silent plea to remember the greater need. Nyra dismissed it, her focus riveted on the man who had shattered her existence. "Tell me, Theron," she breathed, her voice deceptively gentle. "What compels you to believe I would extend a single courtesy to rescue you, to salvage them?" Theron squeezed his eyes shut, wrestling with the turmoil within. He knew he warranted her contempt, her animosity. He'd been a fool, shackled by antiquated traditions and virulent prejudice. He'd spurned the very strength that could have been their salvation, averted this crisis. "Because," he stated, opening his eyes, his gaze surprisingly direct, "despite everything, I cling to the hope that a sliver of compassion remains for the blameless. The pups, the aged, they shouldn't be punished for my failings. It was a reckless play, a desperate appeal to the ghost of the woman he had broken." Nyra scrutinized him, searching for any telltale sign of duplicity, any lingering vestige of his characteristic arrogance. She saw only desperation, a raw, exposed terror mirroring her own when she had been cast out. Adrift and shattered, a mirthless chuckle sputtered from her lips. "Innocence," she repeated, the word like grit in her mouth. "You speak of innocence as though it were an entitlement. I was innocent once, Theron. And where did that leave me?" The specter of that night, the searing agony of rejection, threatened to drown her in its acrimony. She clenched her fists, struggling to regain her composure. "But you are correct on one crucial point," she conceded, her voice hardening once more. "I will not condemn the guiltless to suffer. However, it will not spring from benevolence, Theron. It will be predicated on my terms." She pivoted, pacing deliberately, her gaze sweeping over the faces of her pack. They observed her, their allegiance unwavering, their faith absolute. She was their bulwark, their sovereign, their queen, and she would not betray their interests with a rash decision. "I will render aid, Theron," she declared, whirling back to confront him, her gaze burning with resolve. "But you will concede to my dominion. Silver Creek will become a tributary pack, answering to my authority. You will relinquish all claims to your ancestral lands, your resources. You will obey my directives without hesitation. Your warriors will stand shoulder to shoulder with mine, beneath my banner. And you, Theron," she advanced, her voice a sibilant snarl, "you will be my alpha. You will kneel before me, publicly acknowledging my ascendancy." The ensuing silence was absolute. Theron's complexion drained, his jaw clenched tight. The conditions were draconian, humiliating. It was a complete capitulation, a divestiture of everything he cherished. He had braced for a cost, but this was utter subjugation. He glanced at his beta, Liam, positioned a few steps behind. Liam's expression was somber, but unwavering. He grasped the gravity of the situation. Their pack's survival rested upon Theron's choice. Theron's thoughts raced, wrestling with his pride, his sense of obligation, his deeply rooted belief in the superiority of his lineage. To yield to Nyra, to recognize her as his better, was a violation of everything he held sacred. Yet, to refuse meant consigning his pack to a protracted, excruciating decline. He pictured the pups, their trusting faces emblazoned in his mind. He imagined the elders, their accrued wisdom and experience forfeited forever. He pictured his warriors, steadfast and valiant, who had entrusted themselves to his leadership. He could not, in clear conscience, condemn them to oblivion. He inhaled deeply, the frigid air searing his lungs. He regarded Nyra, her gaze relentless, her expression devoid of any hint of leniency. He knew she would not waver. This was her reckoning, her moment of complete triumph, and he was powerless to thwart it. I concede, he choked out, the words barely audible. He felt the enormity of his decision descend upon him, crushing him with its immense weight. He glimpsed a flash of satisfaction in Nyra's eyes, yet also something else. Something else. Elusive. A hint of a sorrow? Remorse? He dismissed it as a trick of the light. Nyra inclined her head, her expression inscrutable. Very well, she stated, her voice devoid of inflection. Then let us formalize this accord. Here, now, before my pack. She gestured to the patch of ground before her. Kneel, Theron, pledge your loyalty. The humiliation was now complete. Theron felt his knees buckle, his body trembling with a mixture of rage and despair. He glanced at Liam, who offered a nearly imperceptible nod of encouragement. He closed his eyes, inhaled deeply once more, and knelt. The frozen earth ground into his knees, a tangible manifestation of the anguish tearing him apart. I, Theron, Alpha of the Silver Creek Pack, he began, his voice raspy but clear, swear fealty to Nyra, Queen of the Rogues. I submit to her authority, and I will obey her directives without hesitation. I pledge my pack's loyalty and service to her. So I swear. A ripple of murmurs spread through the rogue assembly, a blend of affirmation and incredulity. Nyra watched him, her gaze narrowed, probing for any flicker of deceit. She perceived only resignation, a shattered pride, and a desperate, fragile hope. She had prevailed. She had broken him. But as she regarded him kneeling before her, she couldn't help but question if the victory justified the cost. The taste of vengeance, so delectable moments prior, now tasted like ashes in her mouth. Rise, she commanded, her voice resonating through the clearing. The terms are established. The alliance takes effect. Now, let us deliberate on how we will rescue your pack, Alpha. She spat the designation, the sound laced with venom, yet also imbued with the faintest echo of something else, something that resonated like nascent compassion. The true struggle was far from concluded. It had only just ignited. Uneasy alliance, a palpable dread, thicker than the dawn's shroud, permeated the air. Nyra's gaze swept over the tattered remnants of the Silver Creek Pack, huddled behind the hasty barricades. These were mere echoes of the proud wolves she remembered, their eyes hollowed by terror, their pelts caked in grime and gore. The perimeter's a sieve. Jaren, her keenest tracker, rasped, his voice lost beneath the pup's frightened whines. They'll breach it before moonrise. Beside her, Theron stood, his jaw clenched, his imposing physique now bowed beneath the weight of exhaustion and humiliation. He began a protest, but Nyra silenced him with an icy stare. Spare me yourself. Pity, Theron. Time is a luxury we cannot afford. She turned to address the assembled wolves, her voice a clarion call that sliced through Theron's defeated silence. Rogues, brace yourselves. Reinforcements for the barricades, now. Watch posts established. Silver Creek, follow our lead. Those unable to fight, tend to the wounded. A current of resentment stirred. Murmurs snaked through the lines of the Silver Creek wolves. They bristled at taking orders from a rogue, especially her. Theron cleared his throat, striving to regain a semblance of authority. My Pakhe heed Nyra. She knows the path forward. The words rang false, even to him. As the rogues and the remaining Silver Creek wolves dispersed to implement her directives, Nyra drew Theron aside, her eyes narrowed to slits. This isn't a negotiation, Theron. It's a reckoning. Your leadership failed them. Mine will not. They distrust you, he countered, his voice low and strained. They see an outsider, a danger. Perhaps you should have contemplated that before exiling me, condemning me to that role, she retorted, bitterness lacing her words. Trust must be earned, Theron, and their only need now is survival. The daylight hours were consumed by strategy. Nyra stalked the confines of the makeshift war room, a crude circle etched into the earthen floor of Theron's former den. She indicated a roughly sketched map, outlining her plan. They'll strike from the south, drawn by the scent of weakness. We'll create a feint, drawing them deep into the forest, then ambush them from the east and west. Theron frowned, raking a hand through his tangled mane. Too risky. We're too few to divide our strength. You were too few to hold your territory in the first place. Dare you question my tactics? Nyra snapped, her patience fraying. We must dictate the terms, not simply react. Awaiting slaughter isn't an option. But the pups? The elders? Desperation clawed at Theron's voice. Valka and a small guard will remain to protect them. The rest of us engage, Nyra stated, her tone final. This is non-negotiable, Theron. I'm not here to soothe you with platitudes. Theron winced, the echo of his cruel words from years past reverberating in the silence. He knew her assessment was accurate, but conceding to her strategy felt like utter capitulation. He balled his fists, his knuckles bone white. Fine, your scheme, but I lead the main assault. Nyra considered him for a heartbeat, an indecipherable glint in her eyes. Very well. Lead the vanguard, Theron. But heed this. One misstep, one hesitation, and I will relieve you of command. Do you understand? He nodded, his gaze locking with hers, a spark of defiance flickering to life within him. Understood. As twilight stained the sky in shades of blood orange and bruised purple, the raiding party crept into position. The air vibrated with anticipation, the silence punctuated only by the whisper of leaves and the distant baying of their enemies. Nyra suppressed the lingering embers of affection she once held for this male. The onslaught was immediate, savage. A tide of snarling, bloodthirsty wolves crashed against the Silver Creek barricades. Theron, his eyes blazing with a primal hunger, spearheaded the assault, his powerful frame cleaving through enemy ranks. Nyra fought at his side, a deadly whirlwind of precision and ferocity. The rogues, fueled by years of hardship and resentment, fought with a savage intensity that surprised even her. Despite their combined might, they were outnumbered. The fighting was brutal, desperate. Wolves fell on both sides, their lifeblood staining the forest floor crimson. A searing pain blossomed in Nyra's side as a rogue wolf's claws ripped into her flesh. She staggered, momentarily thrown off balance. Theron, witnessing her stumble, roared in fury, hacking his way to her side, shielding her from further assault. "Nyra, are you wounded?" "I'm unharmed," she snarled, pushing him away. Focus on the fray. Yet his concern, however brief, had breached the fortress she had erected around her heart. For a fleeting moment, their gazes met, and she glimpsed the Theron she once knew, the Theron she had once loved. The connection hung between them, fragile as spun glass, a spark threatening to ignite a conflagration that could consume them both. As the battle raged, they fought back to back, a united front against a common foe. Their movements were seamless, their strikes perfectly synchronized. It was as though years of animosity and betrayal had evaporated, replaced by an instinctive understanding, a shared purpose. In the frenzy, Nyra saw a rogue wolf lunging at Theron from behind, fangs bared. Acting purely on instinct, she shoved Theron aside, absorbing the full force of the attack. Agony exploded in her shoulder, and she cried out, stumbling. Theron whirled, his face contorted with rage. He seized the rogue wolf by the scruff and slammed him against a tree, his eyes blazing with a ferocity Nyra had never witnessed. "Touch her again, and I'll dismantle you piece by piece," he snarled, his voice a guttural growl that resonated with pure menace. The rogue wolf, petrified, whimpered, struggling to break free, but Theron held him fast, his grip unbreakable. For an eternity, their eyes locked, and then Theron released him. With the last of the enemy wolves fading into the darkness, Nyra leaned heavily against a tree, her breath ragged. Theron knelt beside her, his eyes etched with concern. "Let me examine your shoulder." "It is inconsequential," she mumbled, attempting to pull away. However, he gently took her arm, disregarding her resistance, and assessed the injury. His touch was surprisingly tender, his fingers cautious as he probed Caw. "The wound. This demands cleansing and bandaging." He tore a strip from his own tunic and began to bind her wound, his brow furrowed in concentration. The silence stretched between them, heavy, charged with unspoken emotions. "Thank you," Nyra said softly, her voice barely audible. Theron looked up at her, his eyes searching her soul. "You saved my life, Nyra." "We saved each other," she replied, her gaze unwavering. As the first rays of dawn sliced through the canopy, Nyra and Theron stood shoulder to shoulder, surveying the battlefield. The ground was strewn with corpses, a stark testament to the night's brutal conflict. The air still reeked of blood and mortality. Yet, amidst the devastation, a sliver of hope emerged. The Silver Creek pack had endured. They had fought alongside the rogues, and in unison, they had repelled the invasion. A precarious alliance had been forged in the crucible of battle, a fragile accord born of necessity and mutual sacrifice. Nyra had championed the pack that had once cast her out, the male who had once scorned her. She remembered Valka, who understood that this was never about vengeance. As the sun climbed higher, bathing the ravaged forest in its warm light, Nyra turned to Theron, her eyes reflecting a mix of weariness and resolve. "This is merely the opening salvo, Theron. The conflict is far from concluded." The air still reeked of burnt flesh and timber, a vile echo of the savage clash. Nyra leaned against a tree skeleton, its charred bark a cruel rasp against her wounded shoulder. The pain was a relentless pulse, a grim counterpoint to the keening emptiness within. A phantom ache resurrected by Theron's past actions. She observed the wounded quote, "Being seen to." Rogues and pack wolves united in their suffering, a fragile truce etched onto weary faces. Her gaze snagged on Theron, standing apart, his posture defeated, his eyes shadowed by a contrition she'd never witnessed. Was this the reckoning she'd so fiercely desired? The sight of his ruined pride, his scattered pack, should have been a triumph. Instead, a hollow resonance vibrated within her. Revenge, she was discovering, offered no solace, no true balm. The ghosts of past humiliations whispered in her mind, rejection's sting, the brand of shame. She channeled that anguish, hammered it into a weapon. the engine that drove her rise as Queen of Rogues. But at what price? Had the hunt to destroy him transformed her into a mirror image? Pushing away from the skeletal tree, Nyra ignored the jolt of agony in her shoulder. She needed clarity, a still point in this spinning vortex of aftermath. Nyra approached, her silver eyes brimming with an unnerving wisdom. "The past is a crushing weight, Nyra," she murmured, her voice like wind sifting through leaves. "It can break even the strongest among us." Nyra scoffed. "The past forged me, Nyra. It's proof of my strength." Nyra's gentle headshake belied her conviction. True strength springs from resilience, not hate. "You can choose another path, Nyra. The fate of both our peoples hinges on it." Nyra paused, brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" Nyra's gaze drifted towards Theron. "He is not the wolf who spurned you. The consequences of his actions have been laid bare before him, and he is ready for atonement. But forgiveness is not freely given. It must be earned." Nyra turned, studying Theron as he spoke to a pack member, his voice low and earnest. She saw the exhaustion clinging to him, the lines of regret deeply etched into his features. Could he truly have changed? Or was this a charade, another ploy to manipulate her? Doubt stirred, a serpent coiling in her gut, whispering poison. Theron watched Nyra approach, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. He knew he was undeserving of absolution, not after the wounds he'd inflicted, but he had to plead his case. He had to convey the depths of his remorse, his utter loathing for the arrogant, obtuse wolf he'd been. He met her gaze, his eyes a silent appeal. "Nyra," he began, his voice roughened with emotion. "I am not worthy of your forgiveness, but I must tell you how profoundly sorry I am. I was blind, arrogant, cruel. My pride warped my judgment, and I caused you irreparable harm." He paused, drawing a ragged breath. "Seeing you now, witnessing your strength, the leader you've become, it forces me to confront the enormity of my error. You were never weak, Nyra. You were always stronger than I, and I was too witless to recognize it." Nyra remained a statue, her expression an unreadable mask. He couldn't gauge whether his words resonated, whether she was even remotely inclined to consider redemption. He pressed on, his voice breaking. "I would understand if you can never forgive me, but I pledge to you, I will dedicate my life to earning your respect, your trust. Name it. Whatever it takes, I will atone." He searched her eyes, desperate for a glimmer of understanding, of hope. "I misjudged you, Nyra," he confessed, the words stark and raw. "I was wrong about everything." The silence that hung between them was thick, oppressive. Nyra scrutinized Theron's face, seeking any trace of falsehood, any flicker of the arrogance she remembered all too well. Instead, she found only authentic remorse, a profound regret that seemed to emanate from his very core. A tidal wave of weariness swept over her. The weight of her anger suddenly unbearable. Was clinging to this bitterness worth the cost? Was she prepared to forfeit the chance for peace, for a future where wolves and rogues could coexist? She reflected on her pack, on the rogues who had followed her, believed in her. They deserved more than a life of perpetual conflict, of unending vengeance. And perhaps, deep down, she yearned for more too. Nyra moved closer to Theron, her voice low but resolute. "Forgiveness is not easily bestowed, Theron. You shattered me in ways you cannot possibly fathom." She paused, her gaze hardening. "But I am not the same wolf you rejected. I have risen from the ashes, and I refuse to let the past dictate my future. She surveyed the assembled wolves, pack and rogue alike, their faces painted with anticipation. We stand at a crossroads. We can perpetuate the cycle of hatred and violence. Or we can forge a new path, a path of unity and cooperation. She turned back to Theron, their eyes locking. I am willing to offer you forgiveness, Theron, but on my terms. I will not be your mate, your subordinate. I will be your ally, your partner. We will lead together, shoulder to shoulder, as equals. And we will build a new future for all wolves, pack and rogue alike. A collective gasp rippled through the throng. Theron's eyes widened, then softened with a blend of relief and gratitude. He stepped forward, clasping Nyra's hand in his. I accept, Nyra. I accept your terms. I will follow your lead. He squeezed her hand, his gaze unwavering. Together, we will rebuild. Together, we will usher in a new era of peace. A ripple of excitement coursed through the ranks, the long-held tension finally starting to ebb. The Silver Creek Pack and the Rogue Wolves stood as one, unified under a new banner. A banner of forgiveness, of shared dominion, of a future forged from the embers of the past. As Nyra scanned the faces before her, she realized that the journey would be fraught with challenges, setbacks, and moments of doubt. Yet, she also knew that together, they were formidable, capable of surmounting any obstacle, of creating a world where all wolves could prosper, regardless of their origins. The Queen of Rogues, once consumed by vengeance, had embraced a different destiny, a path of hope, of unity, of a future where forgiveness held sway. Their saga had only just begun. A new dawn, rose-tinted dawn, bled across the valley, illuminating the shared haven of Silver Creek Pack and former rogues. A delicate accord, hammered out in conflict's fiery heart and cemented by hesitant faith. Nyra, shoulder to shoulder with Theron, surveyed their combined land from a craggy perch. The wind, laced with resinous pine and the musk of earth, tugged at her hair. A persistent ache pulsed through her muscles, a souvenir from yesterday's skirmish, and a stark reminder of choices made. Theron, his features carved with a weariness deeper than mere exhaustion, mirrored her Shah. Stall, gaze riveted to the horizon. Diminished, perhaps, by recent events, the old arrogance was now superseded by quiet determination. Joren reports the perimeters secure, he stated, his voice raspy. Unaccustomed to reporting. Not commanding. No further incursions detected. Nyra assented, her vision sweeping the land for any hint of threat. Good. Vigilance remains paramount. This it's uncharted territory for everyone. Security must be felt. She sensed his silent inquiry. They have faith in you, Nyra, he finally admitted, a touch of surprise coloring his tone. More than they ever did in me. A sardonic smile played on her lips. Faith isn't a demand, Theron. It's earned. Turning, her expression softened. Here's your chance to prove yourself more than the alpha you were. He met her eyes, a brew of regret and resolve swirling within. I will. I pledge it, Nyra. A pause. What do we call this? This unification? Nyra weighed his question, thoughts colliding. It transcends alliance, she declared at last. It's emerging. We are one now, pack and rogue, dwelling together, laboring together. And you? Theron questioned, a tremor in his voice. What designation do you hold now? Are you still the Rogue Queen? Nyra straightened, her eyes gleaming with newfound strength. Unquestionably, and forever. It's more than just a title, Theron. It's an emblem of hope for the discarded, of resilience for the broken, I will be their sovereign, their shield, their advocate. Understanding dawned on Theron's face. And what of the pack? They require leadership, too. They possess you, Nyra responded, placing a hand on his forearm. You know their hearts. You understand their customs. You will guide them. I will bolster you. We will govern in tandem, Theron, as equals. The day unfolded with measured optimism. The Silver Creek pack, still numb with bereavement, performed their duties with muted tenacity. The rogues, cautious but hopeful, began assimilating into the fold, their unique skills proving invaluable. Nyra moved among them, offering reassurance, attentive to their concerns. Her presence a soothing balm, a radiant beacon in the hazy dawn. She located Valka tending to pups and elders within a makeshift haven, worry etching her face, yet resolve burning in her eyes. They are frightened, Nyra, Valka whispered, her voice hushed. They've endured so much loss. Nyra knelt, taking her hand. I know, but they are sheltered now, Valka. We will rebuild as one. Valka squeezed her hand, gratitude radiating from her. You have accomplished wonders, Nyra. You rescued us all. We rescued one another, Nyra gently corrected. Our strength lies in unity, Valka. Always. As evening unfurled, painting the firmament with shades of apricot and violet, Nyra stood beside the river, mesmerized by the ceaseless flow. Theron joined her, his presence a quiet reassurance. Iroh desires audience, he stated softly. She claims to possess wisdom she wishes to impart. Nyra smiled, appreciating that Iroh's counsel was always worth hearing. Together, they walked toward Iroh's simple dwelling, constructed from branches and foliage. Nyra was seated by the fire, her eyes closed, her countenance serene. Nyra, she greeted, her eyes opening as they approached. I awaited you. Nyra knelt before her, filled with reverence. Nyra, what message do you bear? Nyra reached out, enfolding Nyra's hand. You have weathered terrible storms, child. Rejection, betrayal, bereavement. It has calloused you, forged strength within. But do not surrender to it. Do not allow bitterness to dictate your path. Nyra gazed at her, anguish in her eyes. How can I erase their deeds? How can I offer absolution? Nyra smiled serenely. Forgiveness isn't erasure, Nyra. It's the choice to release the pain, to unshackle yourself from the past. It's choosing to sculpt a brighter future, for all, not just yourself. She paused. Theron has evolved, Nyra. He has confronted his failings. He merits your grace. Nyra glanced at Theron, her heart in turmoil. She had harbored hatred for him for so long, blaming him for her agonies. Now, she saw remorse in his gaze, a genuine yearning for atonement. Could she forgive? Could she trust? Her gaze returned to Nyra, confusion clouding her face. I don't know if I can, she admitted, her voice a bare breath. Nyra squeezed her hand. Patience, child. Heed your heart. The answer will manifest. As night deepened, Nyra and Theron found themselves alone beneath a canopy of stars. The air was brisk and invigorating, fragrant with pine and smoldering wood. Nyra shivered, drawing her cloak closer. Theron reached out, taking her hand in his. His touch was warm, soothing, a tremor racing down her spine. Are you cold? He asked, laced with concern. Nyra shook her head, speechless. She looked up at him, her eyes reflecting a conflict of fear and yearning. She craved trust, craved faith, but the past clung, a spectral presence. Theron cupped her face, searching her eyes. "I injured you, Nyra," he said, anguish thick in his voice. "I am unworthy of your forgiveness, but I vow I will spend my life attempting to earn it." He leaned closer, his lips grazing hers. Nyra closed her eyes, her heart hammering. Her instinct was to retreat, to flee, yet she remained rooted. She was drawn to him, his warmth, his vulnerability. Their lips united, and a dormant ember sparked within her, an ember of hope, of desire, of something she thought extinguished forever. The kiss was tentative, a delicate exploration, before deepening into passion, into urgency. In that instant, beneath the star-strewn sky, Nyra experienced a metamorphosis, a release of the pain and rancor she had carried for so long. She understood she was not bound by her past, that she could chart her own course. Within that future, she envisioned Theron, not as an adversary, but as a partner, an equal, a love. They parted, breathless, their gazes intertwined. I believe I can forgive you," Nyra whispered, her voice fragile. "But it will demand time, and trust, and it will be earned every step." Theron smiled, hope illuminating his features. "I will," he vowed. "I pledge it, Nyra." He reclaimed her hand, and together they began their trek back toward camp, toward their burgeoning life, toward a new dawn. The path ahead would be fraught, but they would face it together, as robe queen and alpha, as equals, as lovers. Uncertainty lingered, yet for the first time in years, Nyra experienced a fragile hope, a belief that perhaps, just perhaps, they could forge a better world. A world where wolves and rogues could coexist in concord and harmony. A world where even the deepest wounds could mend, where love could triumph,